And we're live. Hey everyone, what's shaking? And we're live. Ooh, let me mute that. Thanks for tuning in. Actually, this is my first YouTube live stream. Yeah, I do a ton of YouTube videos, as you know, and I do a lot of live webinars, but I've never actually streamed live to YouTube. So this should be fun. Hopefully my tech works. But yeah, let me know what you guys are doing today. What are you working on? I've got a bunch of questions that came in from different social media platforms and stuff like that, so I'll be answering those. But really, it's just casual. I'm just chatting about web design and product design stuff today. So this all started because 2 weeks ago, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, I put up a poll on YouTube to just find out what you guys are doing, what your titles are, what you consider yourself in the design world. And these were the results. So we've got a ton of UX designers, bunch of web designers, product designers, graphic designers. And I wanted to do a little something for you guys, and this is going to be recorded so you can see this later as well. And I decided to go with the web design topic because I'm actually in the middle of a web design project right now. So it's like pretty fresh in my head. And I'm always getting questions about the difference between what web designers do and product designers do. And so, I wanted to dive into it. So, tell me in the chat, what do you guys consider yourself? If it's one of these things, if it's none of them, go ahead and type it in the chat. And so, I've done both of these for the past 13 years. I've been doing web design and product design and UI and UX. So it's always interesting kind of flipping between the two and seeing like the evolution of how web designers sort of turned into product designers, and then new designers that are coming on the scene that never did web design before. And so tell me if you're working on a web project or if you're working on a product. What are you guys up to? Type it in the chat. Let me know. So I'll just kind of define what I consider web design versus product at a high level, just kind of where I sort of draw the line in my experience doing it. With web design, I'm really talking about like the front end websites, right? The stuff we're accessing through our browsers, the site that introduces the product or the service or just the information to visitors. And I'm talking about marketing sites, right? Like landing pages, squeeze pages, blogs, agency sites, portfolios, that sort of thing. And this could be something that you're designing and then coding. It could be something that you're building after the design on a CMS like WordPress or Squarespace or even like, Webflow. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to code, but I think a lot of web designers have some knowledge of that, or they're at least, learning some of the front end stuff like HTML and CSS, right? And so with digital product design, specifically the UI UX, right? User interfaces, user experience, talking about that end-to-end application that the users interact with to, complete a task, to get something done, to solve some problem with technology that they're having in their lives or that could be improved with a technological solution. And so web applications, SaaS apps, desktop applications, mobile apps, that sort of thing. And so I sort of look at it as the website is that entry point. And then after you cross that login page, that's usually the product, right? That's where the user is doing their thing, trying to actually accomplish something with it. So, when I started out, early 2008, there were only graphic design, web design, and like web developer titles, and then software engineer. That was about it, right? So we didn't have nearly as many terms as we do today. And we definitely didn't have that many devices to access software or browsers on. So, it was simpler times. It was really simpler times. And the role of UX designer didn't really exist yet. So I was just designing graphics. I was designing stuff like logos and brochures and that kind of thing. And then what sort of happened with me was I would be working on a client project, maybe just doing a logo, maybe a PowerPoint presentation, designing some slides or something like that. And then if it was going well, oftentimes the company or the business would be like, hey, do you design websites too? Or do you know someone that designs websites? And I was like, well, tell me more about this website that you need, right? It sounded relatively easy to do. It sounded like something I could figure out. So I would usually just send over an estimate and be like, yeah, I totally design websites. I did not. I definitely did not, because I would then just spend like the entire weekend trying to figure out how the heck to design a website. And that's kind of how it went. And then, I would see these roles for visual designer, and then same thing, right? What's the difference anyway? I figured based on the scope, you tell me what you need, I can figure out a way to do it pretty much. And that was sort of how it went. Oh, I see so many of you guys coming in. Hello. I have so many great questions to get to. So Eric, my co-founder of DesignerUp, he is moderating the chat. So he's going to be there pinning your questions, kind of prioritizing things for me, because I know there's a bunch of stuff that you're going to be shooting at me. So yeah, what's product design? Saif says, I'm definitely going to get to that. Hopefully you heard my little blurb about it, right? And just how my definition really is that product, that user interface, software applications, software as a service applications, that sort of stuff, right? And hey Ray, how you doing? And so, I'd say around 2016 or so is when I was back on the market. I was looking for some freelance work, and I was noticing all of these job positions and roles for UX designer, UI designer. Now, back when I was designing websites, we did kind of have a term for that. It was called GUI design, like graphical user interface design, and that was kind of how we differentiated like software applications, like enterprise software applications, from actual websites. So I was like, well, it sounds like that. What's this all about? So I was kind of trying to figure that out, and I realized, well, Eric and I had been building products for a while by that time on our own. We were building all kinds of software and stuff like that. And that term hadn't particularly come up exactly in that way. And I was like, okay, well, this is exactly what I'm doing, right? I'm designing these flows and these tasks. I maybe wasn't thinking about the process and the deliverables in the same way, but it was the same work. And so when those jobs came up, I was like, hey, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring. I'm going to apply for these things. And every time I did and I got a role, I would just kind of upgrade my resume, upgrade my portfolio with a new case study or a new project, and change my title to like web designer / visual designer, or web designer / UX designer. And that's kind of how it evolved from there. Hi Sabina, I'm just checking in the chat, hoping to change my career into UI UX areas. Now I'm into user experience and web design certificate program. So far I'm liking this program. Nice, awesome. Yeah, I think this is kind of a natural evolution for a lot of designers. Sometimes we find ourselves dipping toes into these other skill sets because there is so much overlap and there's so much opportunity in UX right now. So it's definitely not a bad thing to at least, touch on the subject, understand it a little bit, get a little familiar with it, right? I think if you're jumping into the world of design right now for the first time, like if you didn't have a track record in this space, it feels overwhelming because there's, like I said, there's so much terminology, so much language around it, so much jargon and different titles and roles and all that stuff. But it's not that different than what we're doing when we're using our apps. And it's just kind of thinking about that behind the scenes process. And, there's so many similarities between web design and product. And I'm going to talk about some of those. That's kind of what I want to chat with you guys about. And I want you to tell me some of your confusion and struggles, and maybe I can help clear it up. So, the first thing I want to talk about is static versus dynamic. This is kind of how my mind thinks about web versus product. With websites, they're a lot more static in that really the visitors to the site are just reading, they're clicking, they're scrolling, maybe they're filling out a form. With websites, you're designing those landing pages, those informational sites, right? And that's kind of it. That's like the extent of the functionality. There's not a whole lot of levels and layers of interaction that are happening. There's not too many flows happening. You've got a lot of, some of the same pages. And if we look at what I'm talking about here, let's just take a look at, let's say, these are just some like WordPress themes that you'll see, websites, in the creative space. Like you might have this sort of thing, which is like a restaurant site. And, you're giving them information, you're presenting stuff, you've got call to actions, right? You're really trying to sell the product, show the offering, show the service, that sort of thing. And, there may be, sitemaps involved, of course, lots of visual design principles, lots of thinking about layouts, how you can lay things out in different ways, typography, color, all that stuff. And of course, if you care about responsive and adaptive design and usability, then you're not doing anything too crazy or too fancy. You're probably following, pretty standard design patterns. And just really that minimal of user interaction and input that will actually, in turn, affect your design, right? It's not going to change what's in the interface too much when a user interacts with it. Maybe a button hover state here and there, a form, a pop-up, a modal, that sort of thing, right? And with the digital product design, it's way more dynamic. What is happening when you cross that line from actually logging in and signing up to a product, let's say it's a SaaS service, right? So, let's take like this, for example. You're looking at, this is accounting software called Wave. You're looking at the landing page, the website. This is the marketing website. And there's lots of call to actions. You're really trying to sell, you're trying to connect, you're trying to tell that story about why should someone actually be interested in taking the next step in the product. And then when you're on the other side, there's lots of tasks happening. These users are trying to now use this to really get something done, right? They're trying to run their business with this. They're trying to do their accounting. They're trying to produce invoices, all of these tasks and these functions. And so when they are inputting something into this space, it's going to greatly change what this input looks like. There's so many conditionals, right? When they add an item or whatever it is, things are going to change in your interface. So it's sending this information to a database, and the database is spitting things back out, and that design has to respond accordingly. So it's way more dynamic, I think, than a lot of what's going on front-end websites, if that makes sense. And Sana says, I love your videos. They're packed with high quality information. Please make a video presenting a case study in the portfolio, a complete walkthrough. That's a great idea. I definitely will do some more of those. I do have one in how to build your case study in Notion, which is something I really, really recommend. And also, Eric will link you to that video. And we also have our Notion templates for sale to do those case studies with the actual formula and the outline, so you can plug and play everything right into those. So you might find that really helpful. So check that out. Okay, so Sabine, I see your question too about where a beginner should start, and I'm going to get to that as well. So we'll touch base on that. And so one thing I do want to mention too is, of course, there are overlaps and exceptions to these hard lines that, I'm drawing. And again, there's no right or wrong way to define this. This is just something that I've observed over many years of how this tends to be defined in the industry when someone's hiring a web designer, kind of what the expectations and the responsibilities are, right? And so one of the big overlaps is like e-commerce, for instance, right? E-commerce really threads that line of being a product and a marketing and informational site. So, if we come back over here and we look at some of these like shops, right? Shop flows. We're looking at, selling the product from a marketing perspective, and then actually giving them the ability to go through and a checkout process, a checkout flow, a shopping cart flow. But for the most part, it's kind of a design pattern that we're all familiar with. You're going to add something to your cart. You'll probably see a product card that's going to have a title and a description and a price and maybe some other elements. And then once you've added that thing to your cart, you're going to go find the cart and click on it. And then you're going to see this information that lets you change the quality, that lets you remove something or update something or add a coupon code, right? And there are lots of best practices, usability practices for these flows and patterns that we can study to know how to design them. But a lot of this stuff is, water that's been tread before. We can find answers to these questions and optimize little things for our products as we go. So that's one where a web designer who designs a lot of e-commerce sites, it's a lot like product design. We're doing a lot more of those type of flows. So there's some overlap there. And then, so the takeaway really is that dynamic products are really communicating for function and outcome, right? User function and outcome, completing tasks. Websites are communicating for emotion and conversion. Right? We're trying to connect, we're trying to tell people why this product is something they will want to use, why it might solve their problem, why it's going to make their life easier or save them time. And we're trying to get them over that threshold to log in, right? We're trying to convert them. And so that's kind of how I see some of the, high level differences there. Now, the other thing is revision versus iteration, right? So when it comes to, website design, it's really all about that revision game. Okay, you web designers know what I'm talking about. You probably start with some research, generally, maybe competitive analysis. You're looking at your client or the company's other, similar people that are doing the same thing in the same space. And then you're probably working on branding, maybe a logo, color palette, typography. Maybe you're doing a style tile or a style guide for your client, and then some wireframes. You're getting approval at every step of the way, and then your waterfall approach, you're moving on to the next step. And then you're probably presenting design variations, right? So we're looking here at like this kind of stuff, right? You're in your design app, you're making tons and tons of pages and versions of the same page over and over again, and you're presenting it to the client and you're tweaking and you're getting it to that place, right? And so that is that revision game that I'm talking about. We're always doing revisions until we come to a place where the client is happy, and then we're ready to move on to the next page or code it or drop it into our page builder. And when it comes to product design, it's really an iteration game, right? This design thinking process that we use, and that is the process that we use to develop products and validate them, is that core expertise is really about being able to understand and articulate and verify the problems of these users and the business very clearly before you even start designing anything. And even then, it's this process of things never being finished, right? So every step of the way, we're testing a feature, we're taking a small subset of features and we're testing it with users, and then we're improving, and then we're releasing new versions in the Agile process, or we're starting with an MVP and lean startup process, and we're saying, okay, this is the first set of features that we think would be most valuable to people, and then we're going to build a new set on top of that. And so we're just always trying to improve that user experience and measuring it, right? And so I think that's really one of the hardest mindset shifts. I know it was for me, because it's really this definition of done that's so different for web designers versus product designers. This like the product being realized for a web designer is a much shorter runway than a product designer, right? Like with web designers, we're basically, getting to that point of finishing the website, and maybe there's some updates, copy updates, maybe we're changing out graphics, we're adding a team member to the about page, stuff like that. But for the most part, once it's built and it's live, there's not a ton of iteration that's happening. So really that takeaway there is like revision versus iteration. And again, it's a lot of off-screen work that happens in product design, right? So much of that before you actually see anything deployed to the internet or to your software. And so, yeah, that revision versus iterative thinking. That's one of the big differentiators. And so, funnels and flows, right? That's kind of how I really see websites, as that start of the funnel. It's what gets people into the product and then gets them converted or gets them to request more information or whatever your call to action is. And then the apps are about those complex tasks. Again, it's about those flows. And, it's a lot of aligning brand and layout and stuff like that and getting a more visceral response with the website. Whereas product, it is not so experimental. Everything that's on that page is super intentional and it's there for a reason. And you've got to deliver on the promise that you made in that product, that you made on your website in that product. So it's really about fine-tuning and orchestrating those steps that the user takes. And so, then there's this critical thinking and problem-solving piece. There's a lot more of that. There's a lot more strategy. So when you're designing products, when you're doing user experience, when you're doing user interface design, there are any number of things that you can do. And the real skill of a product designer is separating what you can do from what you should do, right? Really clearly defining your problems, sound reasoning for every element that you choose and why you would choose that over another, and why you place it where you do, what happens when the user clicks something, what's the response, and then you've got to verify that with testing and with metrics. So I personally spend like a lot more time when I'm doing website designs, picking fonts and colors and graphics and making things look really beautiful, and thinking about the story that I'm telling to get a user to buy into this product. Whereas with product, I am really thinking a lot more about problem solving, and I'm thinking about, constraints, and always defining and adding more constraints to what I'm doing, looking for patterns that emerge from my research, and then trying to bring those visual elements and the business requirements all in line with what the user needs, right? Constantly seeking that alignment and that match. And of course, if you're working on early stage products or you're at a startup, then you're actually trying to figure out if the problem that you're attempting to solve with your product is even one that's worth solving. Does anyone even care about this? Can you make space in the competitive market with it? How are you going to find what we call your product market fit? So, sometimes you're working on a product that's already developed and you're improving it and maintaining it. And sometimes you're coming up with something from scratch and you're just building it for the first time. So the other thing that's a big differentiator is copywriting versus UX writing, right? With websites, the copy that we're writing, it's a lot more sales oriented. It's really there to explain our unique value proposition, who this potential product or service is for, this information is for. It's to tell stories and to connect with prospects. And copywriting, I think, leans more to the creative side of writing, and it kind of tells that big picture vision of what's going on. And it's marketing speak. And with UX writing, we're really trying to explain things very matter-of-factly, right? We're trying to succinctly explain the steps and break them down into simple terms and guide the user to completing a task. And I think UX writing really leans on the side of technical writing, but in a user-centered product, our goal is to be as human as we can with that speak. So, to bring back our example here, when we're looking at the front end of a product, for example, back to Wave, again, we run the numbers, you run your business. That's telling me that, hey, with this, I can spend less time doing the stuff I don't like to do and more time doing the stuff that I like to do, right? That's basically the takeaway here. The better way to make, move, and manage your money. All the buzzwords that I want to hear that makes this accounting thing look really simple and time saving. And then when we actually decide to sign up, the UX copy, it's this kind of stuff. It's add a customer, add an item, right? Notes and terms. What do I need to put in here, and how do I, what's the explanation for this? Tool tips and that sort of thing are what we're doing with UX writing. And there's any number of ways to do it, right? For instance, this is Wave. And then over here, we've got one called Invoicely. They both do roughly the same thing. You can see that adding an invoice here is very different. If I wanted to add an invoice and I'm at my dashboard, I would be looking at this and thinking, okay, well, I'm looking for the word invoice, right? Where is it? It's not here right off the bat, so maybe I see this blue button and I check that out and I find my answer there. Or maybe I'm trying to figure out, okay, well, is it categorized as sales or is it categorized as accounting? Not entirely sure. That's information architecture, right? Deciding the nomenclature, deciding the ontology of what's categorized as what based on your user's mental models. And so it's in sales. So then I go to sales and I click an invoice, and then I have to go over here and I have to click create an invoice before I add a new invoice. Invoicely handles the flow a little differently. From the sidebar, bam, I see this word I'm looking for already, invoices. And then when I hover it, I see this plus sign. And so I can just click it right there and it takes me to this new invoice. So for me, that kind of felt a little bit easier. I liked that flow better, but testing with your users will show you that. Heat mapping will show you what are they doing? How long is it actually taking them? Time on task. That's a UX outcome, right? How long did it take them to figure out how to create a new invoice, and how long did it take them to make one? So these are the things we're measuring. And then here it says description, item, name, and description. Not terribly explanatory. It's kind of dry. It's kind of technical. Wave does it like this: enter notes or terms of service that are visible to your user, to your customer. And, there are like other ways that you can do this. I might say something like, need to let your customers know about important policies. Type that here and they will see it. Okay, granted, this is a little wordy. I'm just doing this on the fly, but I could make it sound like I'm talking to an actual person, because if I asked you, right, as a person, I said, hey, what goes in this section right here? You wouldn't say, you enter the notes and terms of service that are visible to your customer. You don't talk like that when you're a person. You'd say, oh, well, if there's anything important that you need visible on your invoice, type it in there and they'll be able to see it. That's how a real person talks. So getting a little closer to that human voice, I think, is a part of UX writing, and it's also a little bit of that copywriting. So it's taking that technical and making sure that it's very clear to everyone what to do and how to do it, but making it sound human, right? And so the other thing, is communication. We're usually talking directly to clients or business owners or product owners or a marketing team when we're designing websites. And with products, we are talking to users. We're talking directly to users. And there are different techniques of selling a client on an estimate versus getting information about a user of how things work for them and how they're experiencing things and what their behaviors are. And if you ask someone something straight out, usually they're not going to tell you. And it's not necessarily because they don't want to, it's just because our brains kind of do that, right? It doesn't accurately reflect. We have some distortion when we're recalling things versus when we're actually doing them, or how much we think we'll use something versus how much we actually do, that sort of thing. And so that communication piece is so important. It's important to figure out how to talk to them. It's important to know how to use the quantitative data and the qualitative data and actually boil it down into something that gives us actionable steps that the rest of our team can use. What does all this mean to an engineer? How can you communicate that on their terms so that it makes sense to them? All of these things are communication skills that we can learn. And in our product design course, we are talking about really intentional and mindful design practices. We're talking about using nonviolent communication to glean where is the real problem coming from, where is the pushback coming from, or where is the defensiveness coming from. What's doing the talking? Is it time, money, resources? And how can we really understand what it is that they need in terms of outcomes, or who's best responsible for doing this, or, if we do this right, what is the payoff for everyone in terms of their work, saving them time or saving them effort. And this is all techniques that you can learn. Those are the soft skills we talk about. And then, one of the last things is that post-production game. So, with websites, again, there's those few updates that you might be doing, some maintenance to your CMS or whatever it is. But with product, it's constant versioning and testing and measuring and verifying. What is really great about having experience in web design and moving into product is that you have so much knowledge already that you can apply. Especially that knowledge of code and just how websites are built. That really helps you understand the technological constraints that your team is working with, or what it takes to build that product. You probably understand how long certain graphics take to load, and how vectors load, and how screens respond in different browsers, or font loading time, that sort of thing. So you have a ton of tools to help you inform this stuff already. But you probably have some blind spots, right? Like some of the user research stuff you might not know, or some of the particular component design and states and that sort of thing. That might not be as clear to you. And it's really not that hard of a transition, once you kind of think about it a little differently. And if you get some structured learning, some lessons that walk you through this stuff, and you are able to talk to other people and designers and bounce these ideas off of them and these use cases that you run into. And, that's why we created our course. It's for that exact reason. It's to fill in those blank spots of UI and product strategy, and getting some business terms under your belt, and understanding what key performance metrics are that you're measuring for a business, and then what UX outcomes you're measuring for the users, and how that all kind of fits together. Because the best way to do it is just to build a product, Build a product from scratch. You will accidentally run into every scenario that you can think of, and then have to reason your way out of it. And that process works. It works, and it gets our designers hired all the time, and it gets them a great portfolio. And that's one of the things that happens if you're in graphics, if you're in UX, if you're in web design, is that your body of work in your portfolio, it might not really reflect some of those underlying processes of a product designer. So you kind of have to get that body of work up to speed, right? And if you design a product, or if you do a couple of design challenges and you add those in, then you can start to show that work and that skill set. And that's really that's really all that it's about. And so, that's just really one of the biggest hurdles. And I know I have a ton of questions here to answer, so I'm going to kind of start going through those, and you guys feel free to add your questions in. But if any of you guys are here, just shout out in the chat. I'm just looking up some of these, and let's see. I'm probably going to mispronounce some names, so I apologize. Fashish Al-Alam, he says he's a web designer. How do you choose colors for a website? Well, if you don't know, I'm kind of the queen of color picking over here on YouTube. So if you've seen any of my videos, you've probably seen some of these color picker videos. Eric will drop one of the most popular ones in the chat, and you can be colorblind completely and use this method to pick colors. It's kind of foolproof. You're doing it with numbers, and it's really not like, any content that you'll really see elsewhere. So check that video out. And I have some pinned questions here. Somyadeep Goswami says, hi, is this possible to design any product without making real user interviews? So, what I would say is it's a terrible idea. It can be done. It has been done, but that is not a user-centered approach to product design. You know, companies used to design like this all the time. In an agile environment, a product owner, a CEO, some business people would come together and say, hey, I have an idea for a product. I think people are going to love it. I don't see a ton of competition. I'm going to build it and see what happens. The build it and they will come mentality does not work so well anymore. And this is exactly why UX designers are in such high demand. The more similar products there are in the market, and we know with the app explosion and software explosion, like there's 20 of the same apps these days. There's 20 to-do list apps and a whole bunch of invoicing software. And, really understanding your users is the core of what we're doing here in product design. So I would say you don't want to do that. It's not really a good idea. However, for some reason, if that is not something that you have direct access to, I would hope that there's someone working on your team or that you're collaborating with that does have some access to users or your target market. Otherwise, that's definitely a red flag. That's not user-centered at all. But for starters, you could be looking at other products, their reviews, their users, exploring competitive analyses from other companies, industry trend reports. But truly, nothing will take the place of talking directly to potential users, your potential like early adopters or, just people that are already using your products or similar products for sure. I hope that answers your question. All right, so another one is from Anastasia Kinvalova. She is a web designer. She works for herself creating web and adaptive versions of websites, and she wanted to know what every product designer needs to know, what kind of skills they should have, hard and soft, where she can find info about UI kits and rules for app design, and what is product design and the difference between web and product. Well, hopefully the last question I've answered, the difference between web and product and my take on that. And I actually have a video that I just released this past week or actually it was a few weeks ago, on my favorite UI kits for Figma. So Eric can link that in the chat. And then my tip for really understanding this stuff is to study design systems. And I have another video about that. Take a look at Google's material design. It's basically like a master class of understanding product design. It shows you all the components, all the usability standards, all of the heuristics and things that you should apply, best practices, principles, all that stuff. Just take a look through all of that and you'll really gain a great understanding of where their parameters are for what's good and bad UX. And of course, there's our course. It's very affordable. That's a process that will take you through, again, all of this stuff, the heuristics, the information architecture, how to make all of these deliverables, how to actually do user research. And in our community, you'll be able to talk to other students and do user research with them. And what every product designer needs to know, it's how to do research, how to design components, how to find existing design patterns that work for what they're trying to do with their flows, and constantly being able to iterate and find constraints and find what you should and shouldn't be doing. And in terms of soft skills, again, communication, presentation, all of those things are just things that take practice, honestly. Like, I didn't just make my first, YouTube video or do my first live stream and feel super comfortable doing it. It was really just practice, and it's a ton of trial and error, and it doesn't feel great a lot of the time. Trial and error is not the most fun thing in the world, especially the error part, but it's what makes you better for the next time. So that's a lot of it. There is a pinned question here from Yvette Robinson. What program do you use for product design? I use Adobe XD. Do you prefer one over the other? If so, why? Good question. Adobe XD is fantastic. here's the thing about design software, okay? Vector-based design programs. The three most popular ones right now are Figma, Adobe XD, and Sketch. And any one of those three are pretty much the same. Some people who come from working with Adobe Suite, like maybe using Illustrator and Photoshop and stuff, they're comfortable with Adobe. They like that flow. They're familiar. They match their mental model. So go with it. There's not much difference between them. There's subtle differences. Figma is great for a lot more team collaboration, I find. I'm still a Sketch girl. I use Figma and Sketch pretty equally, but I like just firing that up. Like for me, it seems super foreign to open my browser and then start designing, because if you don't know, Figma is a browser-based vector design app, and it still feels weird to me, right? I like to just have it like on my computer, on my desktop, and fire it up like while my browser's completely closed. That just feels normal to me. So it's just little like, things like that that are different for everyone. And don't be too precious about your design software, right? Explore them, learn them, try them out, because that software is going to change tomorrow and there's going to be 75 updates to it and a new version released, and you might not like it, and then Figma is going to come out with something cooler and then you want to try that. So yeah, that's great. Go with Adobe XD. Definitely no particular preference. What else? Thanks, Eric, for linking the Figma kits. Vignette, I'm a graphic designer switching to UI/UX. Any suggestions? I'm thinking about doing another one of these lives maybe over the weekend. So check that out. I'll be diving into some of those specific things. But again, it goes back to that body of work. I'm guessing, Vignette, sorry, hope I pronounced that right, that a lot of your work probably shows stuff like logos and, graphics, banners, icons, maybe that sort of thing, maybe brochures, whatever, maybe some website stuff. But if you're not showing process of UX and how you conduct user research, and then how you make personas and journey maps and write user stories and stuff like that, that's not going to show in your portfolio, right? So you need that sort of process. So I would say, start learning about it on your own. There's obviously this channel, subscribe so you can stay up to date with all of the latest, things in product design and moving in that space. Eric, I also have a video, right? We did a webinar on this, going from graphic design to product design. You can find that on designerup.co on our webinars page. It's free. And there's videos on the channel as well that echo some of those same techniques. So have a look at that. And then, take our course. It's fantastic. Students are getting hired like crazy before they even finish the course. And a lot of them are using it on the job right now and not even finishing the course. But it's just really great because it just takes you really step by step through that process. And the community is wonderful. We do a lot of mindful design exercises, and we're talking a lot about intentional design and sustainable design and looking at the long-term effects of our products and what our products have on each other, our users, on the planet, we're all connected in this stuff. So we got to take that into consideration. Sana says, is starting freelance a good idea? Will I get work, or a company-based job is important to mention? I have been freelancing my whole life. I've worked at jobs as well. For me, it's a great fit. As a freelancer, you're going to spend a good amount of your time managing your business, like filing your own taxes and, making sure your bookkeeping is done correctly and all of that. You're not just having your taxes taken out of your paycheck and then, you file one form with your W-2 or wherever you are, whatever country you're in. At least here in the States, it's easier in a job in that regard. But as a freelancer, I feel I'm in a lot more control of my time and the projects that I pick, and I'm not working on any one thing for too long. And I like shaking things up. I like moving from one project to another and doing interesting things and kind of having time to do stuff like these YouTube videos and all of that. So although teaching is my main thing now, freelancing is something I've been doing for a long time. So it's a great idea. I definitely recommend it too in the beginning. If you have a job in mind that you really want to go after, that's maybe like, junior or mid-level UX or product design, and you don't have that body of work that I was talking about, grab a freelance project and do a UX or UI project, because then you'll have a real case study and that experience to put in your resume. So I think that's a great idea. And then, yeah, if company work is something that makes that you enjoy that stable, secure position, and you don't want to take on clients and do that part, then go into a job. But it's such a personal choice. I think understanding that about yourself is super important, and you can always jump between the two. There's no one path. And you're welcome, everyone. Lubov, I remember you were asking me about web design versus UI and UX. And yeah, Google Material Design is your favorite too. Changes every day, totally. It's a great one to learn from. Yeah, Vineet says he's using Figma as well. Yeah, Figma has just taken the industry by storm. They're doing really well, and they're doing a lot of cool things, so highly recommend it. Farouk says he's from France. I love your videos. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And let's see. Can I utilize UI design challenges part of my portfolio? Stuart, yes, totally, 100%. So, there are two pieces, right? There's the work that you do, which is things like design challenges, the projects, the actual real projects that you worked on, and all of those can go in your portfolio. That can become a case study. And it's companies and clients just want to see your problem solving and your process, and more importantly, what you are going to give them. What is your ROI, right? What is the return on investment that this is going to provide to them? Any way that you can show that is great. The other piece is actual experience, and that means working experience, right? When we say experience, it's like, how many clients have you worked for? How many companies have you worked for in the past? How much of this work have you kind of been paid for in the past, right? And so there's overlap. There's a lot of gray area with what people mean when they say experience, but you may need some of that. Like on your resume, they may be like, well, have you ever worked on a real project before? So that may not count in that area. But, if you can really show that you understand the value of this design project that you did, like let's say that you do a design challenge, a prompt to redesign some sort of a shopping cart experience, and you say that I understand the impact that a smooth shopping cart flow can have on an e-commerce company, because 40% of abandoned cart issues happen because of this, and this, and I address that in this challenge. That number, and that's what I call a metric by association, because if you haven't actually done a product yet where you really measured that in a real, user situation or market situation, you can use metrics that other companies have used. So Amazon increased their conversions by 40% or whatever it is by changing their shopping cart flow. That's what I aim to show you, my process of optimizing a shopping cart flow. So take that challenge and turn it into, I get the outcome and the impact that this can have for your users and your business, and that's why I did this challenge. And then people are kind of tuned into that, right? They're on the same wavelength as you. They're not going to worry so much about just, how much experience do you have, or was this a UI design challenge? If you can solve the problem, you can solve the problem. If you can do it eloquently, and if you can do it with purpose and intention, you're golden. All right, Aditya says, if you can only recommend one thing about becoming good at design, what would it be? That's a good question. Growth mindset. Honestly, too many good designers give up too soon, or get discouraged, or feel like an imposter, or never even make it to the designing part, never give themselves a chance, because they're in a fixed mindset where when they fail at something, which you will do a lot in design, and when their work doesn't look like work that they're comparing themselves to, they just have this negative self-talk, right? I suck. I'm not improving fast enough. I've applied for 200 jobs. I haven't heard back from anyone. People aren't listening to me at work. I feel like an imposter. I don't belong here. I don't know. These things that we tell ourselves, that's a fixed mindset that we're in. And I want to do a video about this actually. I'm going to be publishing an article to Medium about this soon. And the growth mindset is just about saying, hey, I'm not perfect yet, but no one else is, right? Everyone is learning, everything is learnable, and everything is negotiable. You know what I mean? That's the truth of it. And if you keep reminding yourself about that, you'll actually have a chance to start doing good design, because you've got to stick at it for a while. Like, it changes all the time, and it's a lot, right? It's a lot for anyone to do or understand, but it just becomes so much more pleasurable if you're in that mindset and you're just reminding yourself of that. So I think that is honestly the most important thing, because you'll never get a chance to see what you're capable of if you are talking down to yourself, and if you're not just trying it and rolling with the punches and getting back up and doing it again, because that's how I got here. That's how I think any good designer, any practitioner, any craftsman of their work will tell you they got there. And I think it was, there's a great quote by Michael Jordan, and it's about how many free throws he's missed or how many shots he's missed in his career, right? And the truth of the matter is that most of us will simply not fail enough to see success. So don't be afraid of that. Just don't let that negativity get to you, right? You know, flip it around, shift it, talk to mentors, talk to people, be in a supportive community. Eric will link to our Mindful Design community, which is open to the public now. You can join, and then you can join Mindful Pro for a small subscription. And then our course, it's like sometimes when you're in that mindset by yourself, you forget. So having people around to help you with this stuff is important. So yes, that's my major tip. You're welcome. Okay, let's see. I got some more questions from some other social channels I'm going to go through. Estuardo Sarti says, I'm a graphic design student. How can I get recognized as a junior designer when I am looking for job opportunities? So I say, call yourself a junior designer. Whatever, you decide to call yourself, junior product designer, UX designer. But this is the thing, network. By that, I do not mean sending out a connection request on LinkedIn. I do not mean, messaging someone on Twitter one time, or liking a bunch of their posts, or cold messaging someone on a social media platform and asking if they have a job for you. I mean creating actual ongoing relationships with someone and supporting them and providing value to them and asking, what can you do for them? Just being a friend, being a colleague. Relationships take time to develop, right? And it's all about how can you be an asset before the job. Because half the time by the time the job is posted, it's too late. In the sense that there are a lot of people that have been in the circle before, and we all know, like, if you know someone that knows someone, it's a lot easier. And a lot of times designers are so busy learning everything and then applying for jobs, they don't realize that the application process starts long before the application process. Right now, whether or not you even have a portfolio, start talking to people, go on Twitter, follow people, join communities, join Slack channels, and start being, someone of value. Let me give you a practical example. All right, one of my students had a couple of specific companies that they really wanted to work for a while, but those companies weren't hiring. And so he started to kind of just follow some of the engineers around. Again, mind you, he was a product designer, and they didn't really have much of a design team per se. And so he would listen to their podcasts and then summarize them in a Twitter thread and then post them and tag him on YouTube and provide that value for their audience to build their profile, to help them in some way. And eventually, the engineer and they kind of had a relationship, and he took notice. And when a position for a designer did come up, that was one of the top of mind people that the engineer recommended. And he was one of the first to interview and got the job. So again, start networking now. Networking is a kind of a dirty word. I mean, it has some weird connotations to it sometimes, but it's just connecting with people and saying, I care about what you're doing, and I think that I can help you. And it starts long before you apply for jobs. So that's really, I think, what getting recognized is all about, right? Recognize other people. Daya says, yes, I too believe it matters more. The mindset matters more than anything else. Yeah. And I mean, it may seem trivial or it may seem a little la-di-da, but man, when you are designing or when you are getting rejected by your 10th or 20th or 100th job application, there are too many designers, especially like, hey, I'm a woman of color, I'm a founder, I'm building products, I've been in engineering before we had any women really in tech doing this kind of stuff or talking about this stuff. So I know what it feels like, but I wouldn't have gotten here if I was talking down to myself too. So that's always the first step. So yeah. Farouk says, I've recently applied to a job at a famous US company involved in gaming products. Ooh, that's exciting. As a product designer, I never heard about roadmaps and many other things. Is it difficult to become a product designer? I don't think it's any more difficult than anything else. No, if you have a good course, like check out our product design course. And oh, I got to tell you something very cool that I'm going to be doing next week as well. If you guys are interested, I never do this, but I'm going to be doing a product design UIUX crash course. It's going to be on Wednesday next week at, I believe, 12 p.m. PDT. That's my time, California time. And you can definitely join that because it's super cheap. I'm making it affordable to everyone. Like even if you can't make it live and you want the recording and the ebook that's going to be provided, just sign up and you'll get that. And it's going to be 2 hours of me actually showing you the entire process and teaching it to you at like 100 times speed and just getting completely into it with a small group of people. So this is the kind of thing, like if you're not sure you want to make a big investment in a product design course, or you're not sure if my teaching style is for you, or you're thinking about maybe signing up for our product design course, check this out. Or maybe you just kind of want to self-learn and you just want a little like jolt to help you get you in the right direction. Come and check this out. The link is right down below this video in the description. It is go.designerup.co/product design crash course with dashes in between. You can see that, and Eric can post the link also in the chat. And so, yeah, come join me for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to do a lot of cool things. You can get to see my whole process behind the scenes. And so, again, it's not difficult. You learn the process, and gaming is amazing. Gaming is like a masterclass in user interface design. The amount of little components and conditionals and interactivity, it's incredible. I game a bit here and there, and so it's just really fun. That whole process mesmerizes me, gamification in general. So yeah, totally doable. Put in the time, have the right mindset, take a decent course, you've got it. Magali Cardona says, can you be a product designer on a marketing team? Even though I am one, to me it feels like my projects are inclining more into marketing visuals and websites. Yeah, that tends to happen on a marketing team because that's all they know, right? They are trying to sell the product beforehand. They're trying to get people intrigued and into it, and they don't understand a lot of the nuances between the tasks that are happening inside of the actual product and the outcomes and the measurements and stuff like that. They're measuring, retention rate, conversions, things like that. And they definitely tend to pull you more towards the visuals and the marketing stuff. So yes, you can be a product designer on a marketing team if you have a product and you want to move into that product team. Yes, Again, this depends on the company, the structure, how the teams are organized. If it's an agile process, if it's, if you're doing sprints and workshops and who's reporting to who and that sort of thing. But I have, started out in a marketing team doing the websites and then moved into product before. So yes, I mean, you'll have to upskill. There are probably some things that you'll need to learn and some processes to understand, but again, it's not hard to learn. It's just a process. Sabina says, my friends are doing Scrum and Agile certification program. Is it necessary to get this certification for UI UX areas? No, not at all. So what you need to understand about Scrum and Agile is that those are development processes. So the engineering team, right, will have this process of, versioning things. They will have tasks. They will be using these product management processes to manage all of their backlogs and their product roadmap and their features. And it's very task oriented. It's very prioritization oriented. And what is always a big point of friction for designers is that designers are doing design thinking. They're really user-centered. And the Agile team doesn't necessarily need to know about their users to do their job. In order to fix a broken feature, they fix the feature, they deploy the code, they deploy a version, and then they check that off of their Kanban board. But UX, Agile, UX and Agile is this space that's really growing right now. And Jared Spool talks a lot about this. Go follow him. If you don't know who he is, he's like one of the godfathers of our industry. And he talks a lot about integrating UX and how to show the value of that to engineers, and how if you do that successfully, they get excited about it. Everyone's really on the same page. The whole design team becomes more design mature, and it's really wonderful. So no, you don't need to be certified, but having a general understanding, if you're going into a company that uses Scrum and Agile processes, which is most software development companies, it's good to have an understanding. But no, a certificate is not needed. If you want to be a product designer, focus on design thinking, focus on product, Okay, Aditya, another question. Designing something comes with a lot of uncertainty in the beginning. Asking questions is the way to clear out uncertainty. How do we know we are asking the right questions and what we should be asking? Well, that's $1 million question, but there are lots of processes. Companies have workshops in place where they do these exercises to help them figure out what the right questions are. In our course, when it's direct designer to user feedback process, we use a technique called the MOM test. And there are lots of different techniques like this. There are actually, scripts you can follow. So come and join our course, learn about some of this stuff. It takes practice too. You're not going to be great at it at the beginning, and different products will need will need a different touch, right? It'll need a slightly different technique. But to answer your question, because you apply a process that's been applied before, because you are doing it and doing it again and seeing the results and seeing what type of feedback you're getting. And you never really know 100% what the right thing to ask is, but empathy is that key. I don't like to just talk about empathy. It always worries me when people think of it as a skill that you can just whip out of your toolbox. Mindful design, as we practice in this course, it is a daily practice. This ability to understand something from someone else's point of view, it is not always easy. I think it takes a lot of dedicated practice, and it's the stuff that you do every day. It's like when your kid is being a brat and you're really trying to empathize with them and see it from their point of view. It is not easy when you're stressed and overwhelmed, or when your husband is not doing what he's supposed to do or something like that. Or when you're on a team of developers and they are just pushing back on your designs. How do you sit in their position and really understand what they're going through? And for me, empathy is about actually doing that thing in their way. I learned to code because I got pushback from engineers, and I wanted to be able to sit down with them and say, this is what I mean. And when I did customer service for a short period of time, and I was answering support tickets for products that I was building, my God, did that give me a new appreciation for customer service and the problems that users were having. Users were trying to do things with my products that I absolutely could never have imagined if I hadn't actually seen the craziness that they were trying to do. But it was normal to them. It only seemed crazy to me. So I had to actually step in there and actually do that and answer their support tickets and try to explain it to them and try to watch what they were doing before I really understood it. And that's empathy to me. It's the practice that is empathy. It's not just thinking about, I wonder what this is like. It's if you're designing a mobile app for moms, grab yourself a watermelon, wrap it in a blanket, and hold it in your arm for a couple of hours while you're trying to do something on your phone. That's if you don't have a kid or a baby already. Try doing that and you'll really notice how difficult it is to maneuver your phone. It puts you in a whole new space, right? That's the practice. And that's something that designers like to talk about it. I don't see a whole bunch of designers walking around their kitchen with their watermelon all day while they're working. Try doing that, really step into that space is what I mean. So yes, that's how you do it. And suddenly you'll kind of know what kind of questions to ask, right? Think about that. If you're holding something in your hand all day and you're using a mobile app, you might want to ask a question about that, like, how much time do you hold your phone? Or like, do you usually put it on a phone stand? Or what finger are you normally like using the app with? This can reveal all kinds of insights. So empathy and process and tried and true questioning, Socratic questioning things. Okay, what's next? Let's see. Oh, this is wonderful. I know Lyubov and I talked a little bit about, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, please, forgive me, but she said, thank you for saving me time and money, discovering my passion and next career change and pointing me in the direction. I love web design and WordPress. Yeah, just doing web design and building pages in WordPress. WordPress taught me so much about component design in general. Like everything is a module, and that's how design systems are. Everything's a module, and the more consistent that module is, and the more you can explain those guidelines to your engineering team and other designers and reuse that, you're systemizing your processes, and that's a big part of designing products. Okay, some other questions here. We're going up on the hour. I'll answer a few more if you have them for me, but let's see here. Shirayu says, I'm an engineering student looking for a career switch. Do I need a master's degree for UI UX? What value does a degree add? No, you don't need a master's degree. The only value, I think, is really about the companies that you apply to. There are some companies, like some of the big FAANG companies, that do require a degree or at least a bachelor's degree, but specifically a master's in UI UX, I say that that's a lot more for really specialists, companies that require one, or if you want to become a subject matter expert in some particular area of maybe usability or like accessibility, things like that that have regulations and that sort of thing, you might need that, but that's on a case-by-case, job-by-job, company-by-company basis. But otherwise, no, you can self-learn, you can take a program, any of the above. So Sophia says, I am a UX designer applying for an internship. What does it take to keep up as a level entry product designer? The same thing it takes to keep up with being a product designer at any level at all. Tons of learning all the time and trial and error, right? We're just improving our processes and our team communication and our user experiences incrementally over time. So don't forget, right? Always schedule some time in your calendar for the networking that I'm talking about, right? Make sure you're reaching out and making connections with people on a regular basis and forming those relationships. Put it in your calendar so that you remember to do it. And then when a new feature comes out on Figma, watch a YouTube video about it, learn it. Don't forget to schedule in learning time. I do it all the time. I spent a good portion of last weekend trying to figure out how to use this ridiculous live streaming app on YouTube that failed me a million different times, and I about gave up 20 different times already, and Eric knows the story. But that's the process, and I get more comfortable with it every time, and I know that that is it because something new is going to come out and I have fun learning. It's a huge payoff for me when something is really difficult and I nail it and I'm like, yes, I got it. It clicks. It makes sense now. It works. So I live for that feeling of learning, and that keeps me doing it. So just keep on doing that and make it a habit by putting the stuff in your calendar. Make time not just for work, right? Make time for like deep relaxation too, Just get your brain into that diffuse thinking mode. Don't always be thinking about work and design and stuff. Just observe. Observe the apps that you're using. What do you do when you first log into that app, and why do you like it? And you don't always have to be thinking about that. Take a lot more time for yourself and self-care than anything else. I honestly believe that's super important to just keeping up, so to speak, right? Just take care of yourself. That's the most important part. Let's see. Sashwati says, I'm working as a senior visual designer. How do I start working as a product designer from being a visual designer? Yeah, filling in those blind spots. Like, visual designers may not know as much about component design and design patterns and design systems and flows and some of the research stuff. So you might be missing a little acumen in some of those areas, and of course some business stuff, right? That's really important. And like, create a product, put it in your portfolio. Take a course where you'll learn that stuff. Get some mentorship. There's a lot of places that you can do that. Join some communities, like I mentioned. That's just get familiar with the process that product designers are using, and then show that process yourself. And check out that crash course that I'm doing next week. I think you'd be a great candidate for it because there'll be a lot of visual designers, a lot of people that are kind of in design or like design adjacent, or engineers and stuff like that are going to be taking it. So check it out. Link in the description. Okay, any more pinned questions? Let's see. Oh yeah, there's some more stuff here. All right, I'll do about a couple more minutes and then I should probably sign off. Let's see. Chiamaka says she or he, I'm not sure, is a data management officer. I collect and document data at the point of entry at airports. What is the ratio of service demand in the tech industry between product designer and web designer? Okay, I'm interpreting that as like, what's the demand for product designers versus web designers? Well, according to some of the latest surveys, like the global survey done by Inversion, where they surveyed all the different tech companies and different product managers and stuff like that, and different founders, product and UX design is the fastest growing and the highest in demand. And Eric will link to that survey as well. You can check that out yourself and see all of the stats. But in terms, that's like growth and in demand for like these new designer roles. But web designers will always be in demand, especially for small businesses, new businesses. The first step they need is a website. Before they build a product, they need to see if people would even be interested in it. And a lot of times it's that first step of the funnel, right? So web designers are always in demand if you like that kind of work. I think the work of a web designer, at least on the back end, is becoming a lot easier because you have things like Webflow where you don't necessarily need to know how to code to build a website. If you're a good designer, you can put components together, or using WordPress or whatever it is, customizing themes. Those are all part of being a web designer. So it depends on the work that you love, but they'll both always be in demand. But I'd say in terms of growth, statistically speaking, product and UX designers are really being sought out right now. Okay, let's see. What else do we have here? Well, this is an interesting question from Joey Brown. I don't think I've ever been asked this before. He builds e-commerce sites, marketing sites, and landing pages. Is there ageism in UX and UI today? I think ageism exists in all industries, right? And in my experience, UI, UX, product design, it's no different. But where I think it's more noticeable is actually, I think, when you're an older product designer with less experience, or you're a younger product designer with more experience. I think there's this cognitive dissonance that's created in people's minds where they just don't quite understand it. They don't grasp it. They're like, why are you 37 years old, but you only have 1 year of experience with product design, right? Or why are you so young and like you claim to be able to do all of this stuff, but you're just a junior. None of that is true in either direction, but it's just a status quo that we have come to recognize, right? So I think in those cases, it might be a little bit harder for you to prove yourself, or you might have to work a little harder to overcome that. But, if you fall into one of those categories, but otherwise, I think, yeah, your age or skill level line, there's not too much ageism. As a matter of fact, if you're an older designer and you have a good amount of experience under your belt and your body of work shows that, you're quite revered, I think, in some ways. So it can work in your favor in that case. But yeah, you may have to frame yourself a little differently or try to leverage your transferable skills a little bit more if you fall into one of those categories. But yeah, I think that's the case there. And let's see here. Michael Musimbi says he's a UX designer. How do you integrate delight and gamification into your UI design? Yeah, we were talking about gamification earlier, right? I really recommend the book called Hooked by Nirayal. And he talks a lot about that basis of gamification being, the trigger and reward system and how to implement that into your UI designs. So that's a wonderful book. It's really enlightening for a lot of different reasons. So yeah, that's Hooked by Nirayal. And if Eric has access to that link, he can send that to you. Robert Croker. Why does that name sound familiar? I believe you're one of my students. He asks, what's your process? How do you sell the value? Good question, right? So you sell people on the ROI and your unique insight into what they're doing and their users and the problems they're trying to solve, right? What is the outcome that they can expect working for you? What makes you uniquely privy to their users and what those users' problems are? We have a tendency as designers to be very focused on, I provide these skills, I can do these things, this is my process, I know how to make these deliverables. Yes, but if you want to prove to someone that you're funny, do you tell them how funny you are, or do you just make a really good joke and make them laugh, right? So really what you need to do is start with something like, I help, let's say you're working for health tech companies, I help health tech startups navigate the complexity of patient privacy and personalization. That's a huge point of contention for all of these health tech startups, right? How do they stay HIPAA compliant but still personalize the experience for patients? So if you have some unique insight into that, maybe because you worked in healthcare, maybe you're not even a designer, but you worked in healthcare before, that is priceless information to them, right? That is the return on investment that they can expect. And you may not have metrics to back it up, but I talked about metrics by association. Look at what other healthcare companies are doing and quote those and say the work I do can help a health tech startup retain this many more patients or can help improve patient outcomes by this much, right? So that's what I would say. Focus on not your services and not necessarily your process, although you'll show those, but always sell them, go in for the kill with the ROI. What can they expect for them investing in you? What are they going to get in return? So I'll see you around the community, Robert. All right, so what else here? Anita Rahman says, currently learning UX UI design for someone who can't work in an office and is starting freelancing right after learning all the steps with a portfolio. She has 2 to 3 designs. Is that a good idea, or should I do an office job with some company to get freelance work? Again, this is that debate between should I do freelance or should I do company work? And like I said before, the process is different. Pitching to a client is going to be really different than going through the job application and interview process for a company. So it really depends on what you feel called to do. If you enjoy being an entrepreneur and running your own business as a freelancer, and of course, there's a lot of places that are like platforms and marketplaces that connect freelancers with, jobs and stuff like that. So that takes out a lot of the headache. And of course, they come with their own service fees and stuff like that. But, the fee is because, well, you don't have to do all of the accounting or keeping the money in escrow or dealing with the transactional stuff. So it's worth it in that regard. But you'll need a track record on those platforms too. Before you'll need some reviews, you'll need to start somewhere. But it's great if you can, do a small business website or maybe work for a nonprofit, do some freelance to get some projects if you need more. If not, it's really a personal choice. Do you want to go down that road of that freelance work? And I talk a lot about the 3 ladders of product design, career ladders that you can take. It's that freelancer ladder. So you're either doing that, or you're doing the company ladder, or you're building your own products, which is another thing. Like if you really want to create your own SaaS app or something like that, that's another way to go. So it's definitely a personal preference. And it's, you can always try a freelance project, see how that goes. If you want to learn more about freelance stuff, Chris Doe's channel, The Future, he's incredible. He's, just the OG of this type of stuff. He can let you really understand client work and freelancing and that sort of thing to see if it's a right fit for you. And yeah, so that's what I would say to that. Segun, hello. I am a UI UX designer, but I don't have a certification. Currently working for an organization, so is certification compulsory? No, certification is not compulsory. I think sometimes a company likes to have some verification of the skills that you have worked on or that you have some experience in. Our program has a certification, and it really is just something that you can say, this is the work that I've done, this is what I learned, this is how much kind of time I spent on this stuff. But yeah, it's definitely not compulsory. Can it help? Yeah, maybe. But I wouldn't worry too much about it. Again, it depends on the company you're applying for. Some are a lot more strict about, what they require in terms of degree and certification and stuff like that. But yeah, no, you can do it with or without. But having a little something is not a bad idea. All right, what else we got? Ashish says he's a freelance UI UX designer. How beneficial is it for front-end developers to learn about UI UX? This is on the same end of the spectrum, or on the other end of the spectrum of should you learn code if you're a product designer? It is very beneficial to understand the mechanisms of design and code. But to actually be able to write code is not a necessity. They're 2 different disciplines, coding and designing. They're definitely 2 different things. And some do both because they like doing both and it makes sense. And a lot of web designers do both because that's like part of their wheelhouse or their offerings. But it is definitely not something that you actually have to learn. But the more that you know about it, if you're a front-end developer and you know about UI UX and the importance of taking a user-centered approach, it gives a whole new perspective to what you're doing. And that widening your field of understanding and making you rethink what you're doing, it's always good, right? It's always a good idea to do that. So yeah, learn about it. Just check out our crash course. Maybe you don't need like a whole course to teach you how to do it yourself, but you want to know that process and see behind the scenes. Check it out. Link, description. I think you'll like it. And for Nita says, we did that one already. Okay. Okay, Grace Kim is a UI UX developer at Excellence Community Schools and is a kind of a generalist designer. And she says, or asks, how realistic is it to make this jump without formal training and by relying on self-learning? It is very realistic. Designers are doing it all the time. But it's difficult to navigate all of it yourself sometimes. It's just a lot easier, and I think it takes a lot less time and a lot of the guesswork out of it if you do follow some sort of a program. Like you can start with something like, IDF, Interaction Design Foundation has some great starter stuff if you're not, sure what that is. We have a ton of resources on our blog, a ton of videos here on the channel, but building something yourself, whether that's design challenges or building a product like we do in our course, and then being a part of a community where you can discuss that stuff, it's super, super valuable. And I think it makes the jump a lot easier and pleasurable. And then, we have these great systems for building your portfolio. And I don't know if Eric linked you to that yet, but we have these Notion workspaces and portfolio templates already built for you so that you can put your work into it and not spend like 3 months putting together your portfolio and case studies. A portfolio and a case study is never done. I need to update mine desperately. I am moving it to Notion actually from having a website for many years, just because it's so easy to do it on there and, keep on updating it. It's never done. It's always a work in progress. So, Oh, Aditya says, sometimes in life or general you have tough times. How do you pull yourself out of that situation when you don't feel like it? That's a really good question. Mindfulness is such a powerful skill that you can learn, because sometimes it's not about pulling yourself up out of it. Sometimes it's about listening to it and saying, maybe this feeling is guiding me to something else. Maybe it's telling me that I need a break. Maybe it's asking me to look at something differently or to reach out for help in a different way. And yeah, sometimes it just takes discipline and to keep going. And habits are hard to build in the beginning. There's like what I consider kind of like upstream effort and downstream effort. And it's balancing that. Sometimes in your career, you might need to push a little bit and do that upstream effort. And it might be a little harder when you're learning new concepts for the first time. But if you kind of, in those tough times, look for the pleasurable little moments of it and what's kind of funny and ridiculous about it and silly about it, and give yourself permission to not pull yourself up, just be sad if you want to and feel that and notice it and say, that's okay. Tomorrow I'm going to try again. This is part of the process. If I tell you some of the stuff I go through, boy, I remember when I was first recording YouTube videos and my tech would just completely just fail on me and I couldn't get the lighting right, or I would record an entire YouTube video and realize my mic wasn't turned on. Oh my God, I would end up in tears afterwards. And yeah, sometimes I would say, you know what, I'm going to give myself like the rest of the day to cry it out and eat ice cream and watch TV. And I'd be like, that's it, I'm never doing YouTube again. And then, when it would go right, I'd be like, that was so fun. That really inspired me. Or I'd see someone else talking about something on YouTube and that would really inspire me. And so I would say, hey, okay, is it worth it? Yeah, I think it's worth trying again. I can't stop thinking about it. I'm still my mind is still trying to figure it out. It's definitely not avoiding it. It wants to understand this. And curiosity is key. If it feels bad, be curious about it. Don't judge it. Don't label it. Just because society tells you this feeling is bad or this feeling is good, it doesn't make it so. Just be curious about it. What does it feel like when you feel bad and when you're in a tough time? What does it feel like when you feel good and things are going right? That's it. That's how everything is. And I think we're just here to always have that experience. We're not just here to only feel good things too. So if you're having a tough time, then that means you are just right there with the rest of us. So, I think Lubov, if you're still here, you were telling me on chat how difficult it was for you to do UX and you didn't like the research and it was really tough for you. And my advice to her was don't do it then. Try out web design instead, right? Try out designing sites on WordPress or working on a team where someone else is doing the research and you're just doing the UI stuff. And that was kind of what she needed, but she kind of had to be pushed towards that to go seek some help, right? Sometimes we need that. So it's not a bad thing, is what I'm saying. And then, sometimes you'll find the inspiration and the people you need at the right time. That's a really good question. Thank you. Join our community. I think you would be a wonderful asset to our mindful design community. We're always asking these types of questions and talking about this type of stuff that plagues us daily. So All right, everyone, we're coming up on an hour and a half. That was a pretty fun live stream, and I know a lot of you are going to be watching this later if you didn't have a chance to tune in right now, but it was so fun. I want to do another one of these if you guys are into it. Share it, follow us. I'm going to, just put, you can follow us on at DesignerUp Co. and subscribe, because every time I do one of these or I'm thinking about scheduling one, you'll get a notification. Eric will post the community on our website. Eric, will you go ahead and post the link to the community where you can join? And yeah, and check out that crash course if you want to do something like that. Check out our course. All of those links will be around this video down there somewhere. And yeah, let other people know. If you know some graphic designers, share it, let them know. And another question, I'll answer one more. How can you be consistent being a designer? What do you mean by consistent, Sigun? Give me a little more description about that. Yeah, let me know what you mean by that. If you mean consistency with the designs that you produce or your habits. Thanks, Eric, for posting that. And yeah, so you guys can definitely post your questions in the comments below after the live stream ends, and I'll be sure to drop in there and answer them if I missed anything. You guys had really great questions, kept me on my toes. This is fun. I'm definitely going to be doing some more of these. So thank you all. I really appreciate you spending time with me this afternoon, and I hope everybody stays curious and stays mindful, all right? We'll see you again next time.